She became a Mafia bride, but her pride started a war. The wedding was supposed to end a war. Instead, it started one. Rain fell over the ancient city like whispered secrets. Black cars lined the narrow street outside the cathedral. Men in dark suits stood like statues beside them, their eyes scanning every shadow. Inside the cathedral, power sat in silence. Every seat was filled with people who ruled something dangerous. Crime families, smugglers, politicians pretending to be saints. They had gathered for one reason: peace. At the altar stood Adrian Viscari, the most feared Mafia leader in the Eastern syndicates. Tall, calm, untouchable, a man known for ending conflicts with a single quiet command. Rumors said he had once stared at a rival for 3 seconds, and the man vanished the next day. Adrian didn't smile. He didn't need to. Fear had always done the smiling for him. But today wasn't about fear. Today was about a bride. The cathedral doors opened slowly, every head turned, and then she walked in. Elena Marcelli, the daughter of the Marcelli family, a dynasty that had fought the Viscari family for nearly 30 years. She moved down the aisle like she owned the ground beneath her feet. Not nervous, not hesitant, proud. Her white dress flowed behind her like a declaration of war, disguised as silk. Most brides lowered their eyes. Elena didn't. She stared straight at Adrian. And in that moment, something invisible shifted in the room. The men who understood power felt it immediately. This woman was not surrendering. She was arriving. The marriage had been negotiated like a treaty. For decades, the Marcelli and Viscari families had bled the city dry with assassinations, betrayals, and territorial wars. Businesses burned, ships vanished, bodies were found in rivers. The police called it organized crime, but the families called it tradition. Eventually, the old leaders grew tired of burying sons, so they made a decision: marry the war away. Elena Marcelli would become Adrian Viscari's bride, merging 2 empires into one. Peace through bloodlines, simple, efficient, final. At least, that was the plan. Elena reached the altar. The priest began speaking. His voice echoed softly through the cathedral. But Adrian wasn't listening. He was watching her, closely. Adrian had expected many things when this arrangement was proposed: fear, anger, resentment. But Elena carried none of those. She stood like a queen accepting a crown, and that made Adrian uneasy. A weak bride could be controlled. A proud one could be dangerous. When the priest asked the question, the entire cathedral seemed to hold its breath. "Do you, Adrian Viscari, take Elena Marcelli as your lawful wife?" Adrian answered immediately. "I do." His voice was calm, certain. The priest turned to Elena. "Do you, Elena Marcelli, take Adrian Viscari as your lawful husband?" A pause. Just a second. But in rooms filled with powerful men, seconds mattered. Elena looked directly at Adrian before speaking. "I do." The words sounded simple, but something in her tone felt like a challenge. Not submission, not acceptance. Something else, something sharper, something dangerous. The kiss sealed the treaty. Applause filled the cathedral. 2 crime empires had just become one. War was over, or so everyone believed. The celebration happened that night in Vescari Manor, a massive estate overlooking the sea. Crystal chandeliers lit the marble halls. Champagne flowed like rivers. Laughter echoed from rooms where men who once tried to kill each other now toasted unity. Politicians shook hands with smugglers. Rivals called each other brothers. Peace looked beautiful from the outside, But Elena stood on the balcony alone. The ocean wind tugged gently at her veil. Behind her, the party roared, but she wasn't celebrating. She was thinking. Adrian stepped onto the balcony. He moved quietly, like a predator that never needed to rush. "You should be inside," he said. "Elena Vescari should be greeting guests." Elena didn't turn. "I didn't marry them." Adrian studied her. Most women in this world avoided speaking like that to him, but she sounded perfectly comfortable. "Tonight united two families," Adrian said. "It ended a war." Elena finally looked at him. Her eyes were steady. "No," she said softly. "It paused one." The wind grew colder. Adrian felt something tighten in his chest. "You disagree with the peace?" Elena stepped closer. "Peace isn't real when it's forced." Adrian's voice cooled slightly. "Careful." Elena smiled faintly. "Careful is how people stay weak." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Two powerful personalities measuring each other. Two leaders pretending they weren't. Finally, Adrian said something unexpected. "You're not what I expected." Elena tilted her head. "That's because you expected obedience." Adrian didn't deny it. She continued. "My father spent 30 years fighting your family." "Yes." "And tonight he gave his daughter away to the enemy." "Yes." Elena leaned slightly closer. "So tell me, Adrian." Her voice dropped. "Do you truly believe I married you to end a war?" Silence. Somewhere inside the mansion, glasses clinked and music played. But the balcony felt like a battlefield. Adrian watched her carefully. "Why did you marry me?" Elena smiled again. But this time it wasn't soft. It was sharp. "Because," she said quietly, "sometimes the fastest way to destroy an empire is from inside it." Adrian didn't react, not outwardly, but something deep inside him woke up. Interest, danger, possibility. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said. Elena shrugged. "So you married me." For the first time that night, Adrian Vescari smiled, and that smile made powerful men nervous. "Good," he said calmly. "I was getting bored." Inside the mansion, a servant approached one of Adrian's most trusted lieutenants. The man whispered something in his ear. The lieutenant frowned, then quickly walked toward Adrian. "Boss." Adrian turned. "What is it?" The lieutenant hesitated before speaking. "There's been an incident." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "What kind of incident?" The lieutenant glanced briefly at Elena before answering. "One of the Marcelli warehouses." He paused. "It burned down an hour ago." The balcony went silent. Adrian looked slowly at Elena. The ocean wind lifted strands of her dark hair. Her expression didn't change. Not surprise, not concern. Nothing. Just calm. Adrian asked one quiet question. "Was anyone hurt?" The lieutenant nodded slowly. "3 men dead." More silence. Adrian studied Elena carefully. "Interesting timing," he said. Elena finally spoke. "Yes." Her voice was almost thoughtful. "Very interesting." Adrian's eyes darkened, because now he understood something. This marriage had not stopped the war. It had simply moved it closer, much closer, into his house, into his life, into his bed. And the woman standing in front of him might be the most dangerous enemy he had ever married. But the real war hadn't even begun yet, because by sunrise, someone much more powerful would die, and the entire underworld would blame Adrian's bride. Morning arrived with gunfire, not the loud chaos of a street shootout. No, this was quieter, more deliberate, on the kind of violence that only existed in the highest levels of the underworld. Adrian Viscari woke to the sound of his phone vibrating against the marble nightstand. He answered without opening his eyes. Yes. The voice on the other end was tight with urgency. Boss, it's done. Adrian opened his eyes slowly. Explain. The council meeting this morning. Don Matteo Ricci never made it. Adrian sat up. How? He was shot leaving his residence. Silence filled the room. Don Matteo Ricci wasn't just another crime boss. He was the man who enforced peace between families. The man who signed the treaty that allowed Adrian and Elena to marry. And now he was dead. Adrian's voice hardened. Who did it? Another pause. Then the words came carefully. They're saying it was the Marcelli family. Adrian's jaw tightened. And why would they think that? There was a message left at the scene. What message? The man hesitated, then said the words quietly. A silver wedding ring, engraved with the initials EM. Adrian's eyes moved slowly toward the empty side of the bed. Elena was gone. The city exploded before noon. Crime families began arming themselves. Old alliances reappeared overnight. Rumors spread through every bar, warehouse, and back room in the city. The Marcelli family had betrayed the peace. Their daughter had infiltrated the Vescari Empire, and now the war was back. Only this time, it was worse. Because betrayal always burns hotter than rivalry. Adrian walked into his war room, a long table stretched across the chamber. His most trusted men sat around it. None of them looked comfortable. One of them spoke first. Boss, we have to move fast. Another nodded. The Marcelli family crossed the line. They killed Ricci. They framed your wife. They declared war. Adrian said nothing. His mind was still on the balcony conversation from the night before. Sometimes the fastest way to destroy an empire is from inside it. Had Elena been telling the truth? Or had someone else started the fire? Another lieutenant leaned forward. There's more. Adrian looked up. What? Elena left the mansion early this morning. Where? We don't know. That answer didn't please Adrian. Not at all. Across the city, Elena Marcelli sat inside an abandoned opera house. Dust floated through the sunlight, pouring from broken windows. A man stood beside her nervously. Everything is happening exactly as you predicted. Elena nodded calmly. The council will panic. Yes. They will assume the Marcelli family broke the treaty. Yes. And Adrian, the man swallowed. No one knows what Adrian Viscari will do. Elena stood. Her white wedding dress from the night before had been replaced by a black coat. Adrian is the only variable, she said, and variables are dangerous. The man looked uneasy. You really think you can beat him? Elena smiled faintly. I don't need to beat him. She walked toward the exit. I just need to make him angry. Back at the mansion, Adrian received another message. This one came from the City Council of Crime Families. A meeting. Immediate. Mandatory. Adrian arrived at the council chamber surrounded by armed guards. Every crime boss in the city was already seated. The air was thick with tension. One of the older leaders spoke. Adrian, we all know what happened this morning. Adrian sat slowly. Yes. Another man slammed his hand on the table. This was Marcelli treachery. They murdered Ricci. They broke the peace, several voices agreed. Another added sharply. And your wife is a Marcelli. The implication hung heavily in the room. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Your point? The old leader spoke again. If your wife is responsible. He paused carefully. Then justice must be served. Everyone understood what that meant. Execution. Adrian's expression didn't change. You're suggesting I kill my own wife? The room remained silent, but silence was confirmation. Adrian stood slowly. His voice was calm. Too calm. My wife has been in this family for less than 24 hours. Yes. So if she managed to assassinate Don Ricci, his eyes scanned the room, then perhaps your security was the real failure. Several men shifted uncomfortably. Adrian turned toward the door. We will find the truth. And then he added something colder. But anyone who tries to judge Elena Vescari before that, his voice dropped slightly, will answer to me. The meeting ended immediately. No one challenged him, because Adrian Vescari didn't make threats. He made promises. By nightfall, the city was on edge. Small skirmishes broke out between Marcelli and Vescari soldiers. Nothing massive yet, but the tension was building, waiting, like a storm deciding where to strike first. Adrian stood in his office reviewing intelligence reports. Then the door opened. One of his guards rushed in. Boss. What? We found her. Adrian looked up slowly. Where? Old Bellini Opera House. Adrian closed the folder in front of him. Prepare the car. The opera house was quiet when Adrian arrived. His men surrounded the building, weapons ready. He entered alone. Inside, footsteps echoed across marble floors. Then he saw her. Elena stood near the stage, waiting. She didn't look surprised. You found me faster than expected, she said. Adrian stopped several feet away. Did you kill Don Ricci? Direct, sharp. Elena tilted her head. You think I did? I think someone left your ring beside his body. Elena sighed. That was sloppy. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Sloppy? Yes. Why? Because if I had killed Ricci, she looked at him carefully, I would never have left evidence. Adrian studied her face. She wasn't lying, or she was incredibly good at it. Then who did it? Elena's voice softened. The same people who arranged our marriage. Adrian frowned. The council? Yes. That makes no sense. Elena walked closer. It makes perfect sense. How? Because peace is bad for business. Adrian didn't respond immediately, but he understood something important. Crime thrives on conflict, and many powerful men had grown rich during the Marcelli-Vescari War. Peace threatened their profits. So they killed Ricci, Adrian said slowly, and blamed you. Elena nodded. Which forces you to choose? Choose what? She looked him directly in the eyes. Your wife, or your allies. Adrian laughed quietly, for the first time that day. A dangerous laugh. Elena, do you know why people fear me? She didn't answer. Because they believe I'm ruthless. Yes, but that's not true. Adrian stepped closer. I'm patient. Elena watched him carefully. And patience wins wars. Adrian looked toward the dark balcony above the stage. Your theory about the council, he nodded slightly, is interesting. Then he turned back to her. But we still have one problem. What problem? You started a war the moment you told me you wanted to destroy my empire. Elena's pride sparked in her eyes. And you married me anyway? Adrian smiled faintly. Yes. A pause. Then he said something unexpected. So let's destroy the right empire. Elena blinked. You believe me? No. Adrian's smile widened slightly. I believe something bigger is happening. He walked toward the exit. And whoever killed Ricci, his voice dropped coldly, made a very expensive mistake. 3 nights later, the council gathered again, but this meeting was different. Because Adrian Viscari had called it, all the crime leaders sat around the table once more. Adrian stood at the head. Elena stood beside him. Several men glared at her openly. One of them spoke. "You dare bring her here?" Adrian ignored him. "I've discovered something interesting." The room grew quiet. Adrian pressed a button on the screen behind him. Security footage appeared, a car leaving Don Ricci's mansion, the driver's face visible. Gasps spread through the room, because the driver wasn't Marcelli, and it wasn't Viscari. It was one of the council members. Adrian looked slowly around the room. "Peace was bad for your profits." The guilty man stood abruptly. "This is a lie." Adrian didn't react. Another video appeared. The man paying a sniper. Another video. The ring being planted beside Ricci's body. The room erupted in shouting. The man reached for his gun, but Adrian was faster. One shot, clean, precise. The man collapsed beside the table. Silence filled the room again. Adrian lowered his weapon. War is expensive. His eyes swept across the council. But betrayal, he paused, is fatal. No one spoke, because everyone understood. Adrian had just proven 2 things. He controlled the truth, and he controlled the war. Later that night, Elena stood once more on the mansion balcony. The ocean wind moved through the darkness. Adrian stepped beside her. "The council will obey now," he said. "Yes, but something still bothers me." Elena looked at him. "What?" Adrian studied her carefully. "You predicted everything." "Yes." "The war." "Yes." "The council betrayal." "Yes." Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly, almost like you wanted it to happen. Elena didn't answer immediately. Finally, she smiled. A proud smile. "I told you something on our wedding night." "What?" "Sometimes the fastest way to destroy an empire," she looked at the glowing city below, "is from inside it." Adrian chuckled quietly. "And whose empire are we destroying, Elena?" Her eyes met his. "That depends." "On what?" "On who betrays us next." The wind carried her words into the dark sea, and somewhere far below the cliffs, the Underworld realized something terrifying. The war hadn't ended. It had evolved. Because now the most dangerous power couple in the criminal world was ruling it together. The city did not sleep that night. It held its breath. The execution of the council member spread through the Underworld faster than gunfire. By dawn, every crime family knew 2 things. Adrian Viscari had exposed the traitor, and Elena Viscari had stood beside him when it happened. The message was clear. The Mafia bride had not been destroyed by suspicion. She had survived it. But survival created a new problem: fear, and fear always makes powerful men dangerous. 3 days later, Adrian received a message sealed in black wax. No name, no return address. Inside was a single sentence: "A queen with pride is more dangerous than a king. Remove her, or we will." Adrian stared at the message for a long time. Then he burned it. Because he already knew who sent it: the remaining members of the council. They were afraid, and afraid men always try to eliminate what they cannot control. That evening, Elena sat in the mansion library reviewing shipping routes. Adrian entered quietly. "You have enemies," he said. Elena didn't look up. "I married one." Adrian leaned against the desk. "They want you dead." That got her attention. She closed the folder slowly. "Good." Adrian frowned slightly. "Good?" "Yes." "Why?" Elena stood. "Because if they fear me, they will reveal themselves." Adrian studied her. You really enjoy this, don't you? What? The war. Elena walked toward the window, the city lights reflected in her eyes. I spent my entire life watching men fight over power. She turned back to him. But none of them ever changed the rules. Adrian crossed his arms. And you think you can? Elena's voice was steady. I know I can. That night, the first attempt came. It happened during a charity gala held in the city's largest hotel. Politicians, business leaders, crime families pretending to be respectable. Elena stood beside Adrian at the center of the ballroom. Music played, glasses clinked. But Adrian noticed something immediately. One of the waiters was walking too slowly, too carefully, too focused. Adrian leaned closer to Elena. Don't turn around. Why? There's a gun behind you. Elena didn't flinch. What do we do? Adrian's voice was calm. We let him try. The waiter reached into his jacket. But before the weapon cleared the fabric, a single shot echoed through the ballroom. The assassin collapsed instantly. The entire room froze. Adrian lowered the small pistol hidden. The legend of the Mafia bride did not stay inside the city for long. Stories like that never do. Within weeks, whispers began spreading through the ports of Marseille, the casinos of Monte Carlo, and the back rooms of Istanbul, where powerful men traded secrets for fortunes. They spoke of a woman who had married a king of the Underworld, but instead of bowing beside him, she had reshaped the entire empire. Some called her brilliant, others called her reckless, but most of them called her something far more dangerous, inevitable, because every story about Elena Vescari carried the same warning. If you challenged Adrian Vescari, you would face a ruthless king. See, but if you challenged his wife, you would face the architect of the war that made him unstoppable. 6 months after the rebellion ended, a private gathering took place in a remote villa outside the city. 5 crime leaders from neighboring regions sat around a long wooden table. Each of them controlled vast territories, ports, arms routes, smuggling corridors. Men like them were not easily intimidated. Yet the mood in the room was cautious. One of them finally spoke. We cannot ignore the Vescari Empire anymore. Another man nodded slowly. They control nearly every trade route in the region. A third leaned forward, and they have no council to balance their power. Silence followed that statement, because everyone understood the implication. Without the council, there were no limits. One of the older leaders rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I've dealt with Adrian Vescari before, he said. He's dangerous. Another man responded quietly. Adrian isn't the problem. The room turned toward him. What do you mean? The man sighed. The problem is his wife. Several of them exchanged uneasy glances, because they had all heard the same stories. The wedding that started a war, the council betrayal, the rebellion she secretly orchestrated, the empire she helped build from chaos. One of the men finally asked the question no one wanted to say aloud. What happens if they decide to expand? No one answered immediately, because every man in that room knew the truth. If Adrian and Elena Vescari ever chose to expand their empire, stopping them would require a war unlike anything the Underworld had ever seen. Back in the city, the Vescari mansion stood quiet beneath the moonlight. Inside the study, Elena was once again studying reports, but this time the map on the table was larger, much larger. It showed not just the city, but the entire region, ports, air routes, trade networks stretching across borders. Adrian entered the room and immediately noticed the new map. "You're thinking again?" Elena didn't look up. "I'm planning." Adrian walked closer. "That's usually when something expensive happens." She smiled faintly. "Power is always expensive." Adrian studied the map. "These aren't our territories." "Not yet." Adrian leaned against the table. "Are you planning to start another war?" Elena finally looked up at him. "No." "Good. I'm planning something much more efficient." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "And what would that be?" Elena gently placed a small marker on the map, right in the center of a neighboring territory. "Expansion," Adrian chuckled softly. "I knew peace would bore you eventually." Elena shrugged slightly. "Peace is just preparation." Adrian folded his arms. "For what?" Elena met his eyes. "For the future." A quiet silence filled the room. Then Adrian asked the question that had been slowly growing in his mind for months. "When we first married," Elena waited, "you said you wanted to destroy my empire." "Yes," Adrian gestured toward the massive map. "But now you're expanding it." Elena thought for a moment. Then she gave an answer that made Adrian smile. "I never said whose empire I wanted to destroy." Adrian laughed quietly, and in that moment he realized something important. The underworld had always feared ruthless men, but history would remember something else entirely. A woman whose pride started a war, and whose ambition built an empire that might one day rule far beyond the city. Later that night, Adrian and Elena returned to the balcony overlooking the sea. It had become their place, the place where wars began, and where empires were imagined. The wind carried the distant sound of ships moving through the harbor. Adrian rested his arms on the railing. "Do you know something interesting?" Elena looked at him. "What?" "When people talk about us now, they're afraid." "Yes." She smiled slightly. "They should be." Adrian nodded toward the glowing skyline. "The underworld thinks we're finished." Elena followed his gaze across the city. "They're wrong." Adrian looked curious. "Why?" Elena's voice was calm. "See, because this time, she wasn't talking about war. She was talking about destiny. Empires," she said quietly, "are never finished." The wind carried her words into the dark sea, and somewhere far beyond the city, new enemies were already beginning to hear the legend of the Mafia bride, the woman whose pride started a war, and whose ambition might one day rule the entire underworld.